So we talk a lot about living in the present, being in the present moment. You've probably heard us talk about that. You may have read the book, The Power of Now, right? About being present in the moment. So have you ever thought about what it is that distracts you from being present in the moment? Have you ever really considered what that might be? Is it the running dialogue in your head? We are the best attorneys in our heads, aren't we? We can take both sides of the issue and argue both sides eloquently for extended periods of time, right? I know I can. And just when I think I've got it resolved, then I'll go to the other side for a while. So this running dialogue, sometimes that can be the distraction. Maybe it's an electronic screen. Maybe it's a television. Maybe it's a computer. Maybe it's your phone that distracts you, that calls your attention away. Perhaps it's music, a radio, or a favorite playlist. What is the constantly running noise that you use to turn down, turn off the voice of spirit, the intuition that is available to us? What is it that distracts you in the outer from listening to the inner? What are the things that generally distract you from experiencing being present, being still, being in the silence? I know folks who turn that television on first thing in the morning. They leave it on all day. It's background noise. It's on throughout meals. They might even leave it on when they go to bed to go to sleep with it and let it just run in the background. Maybe they set a timer. Maybe it runs all night. Now, I know many of us in this room do not watch television, maybe not even at all. So that may not be your distraction. But I'm going to bet that we all have something. We all have something that distracts us from being present in the moment to being in the stillness, going into the silence. It was one of the common complaints that we heard about the lockdown last year. I'm just with myself all the time. I'm tired of the conversations in my head. I need, stimulation. I need to talk to people. That was one of the complaints that we heard at that time. So whatever yours might be, this month we are starting a new series. Our theme is Living from the Intuitive Side. And we're going to be exploring intuition and things that might keep us from tuning into our intuition. What is it? How does it work? How can we access it and use it for more joyous living, tying in, of course, to our annual theme? Today, my talk as we begin the series is Into the Silence. Into the Silence. You've probably heard that if you've been around here for a while. We're going to move into the silence. What is it? Is it a place we go to? How do we get there? What is this into the silence thing? Where is it? Well, it turns out our founder, Ernest Holmes, who's the founder of the Centers for Spiritual Living, he's the author of The Science of Mind, the philosophy that we teach from. He had a lot to say about silence. Now, in my reading this week, I found that he equated silence to meditation and to communion with the divine. And he used those terms interchangeably, meaning to listen to spirit within. Now, I'm going to use one of Joe's techniques from last week. I'm going to fire hose you with a whole lot of Ernest Holmes quotes this morning, okay? And as he said last week, you will receive what you're here to receive this morning. So listen up. Here's a few things he said about silence. The silence means a contemplation in the quiet of the mind when the objective turmoil is temporarily stilled and we rise in our consciousness to the place of pure spirit. We should spend a certain amount of time meditating upon what we are, rather than upon what we wish to do, since this opens up a larger possibility, what Karen was just singing about. Life gives us the tools, but we have to use them. It's from the mountaintop of spiritual communion that we receive the inspiration, and we must keep the channel free and clear. We must provide a way for the ideas of spirit to flow into our minds and out into what we are doing. And we must give our consent to them. We must say yes. One part of the mind is already in heaven, for there is a place in you and in me that is above confusion and fear, no matter how disturbed our thoughts may be. If we get quiet long enough and listen deeply enough, we shall hear. When we are waiting on the divine presence and listening to the voice of God through our own intuition, we come into a consciousness of peace and a realization that we all belong to the one human family. To meditate upon the presence of God is to indraw the universe into one's own soul. Communion with the Spirit is one of the greatest privileges of life. By communion with God, we do not mean telling the infinite what to do or how to do it, for that's talking at God rather than communing with God. By communion, we mean silently entering the divine harmony and beauty until we feel that harmony and beauty in our own souls and our own minds. There is always a silent communion going on between the individual soul and the invisible presence. This communion should become a conscious union of the self with the overself, of the mind with the spirit, of the personal with the universal. As the artist communes with the essence of beauty and gives birth to form, so our mind should commune with the divine presence. God speaks when we listen. God is there when we open the door. And when we listen, there is a response from something greater than ourselves that is the infinite person, the limitless possibility. God speaks whenever and wherever we listen to our inner voice. Now that's just a fraction of what he had to say about being in the silence and listening to Spirit. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful writings throughout much of his material. And what I gleaned from his words and also from my own personal experience is the necessity of going into the silence, of being still, of communing with the divine, of connecting with, of listening to Spirit. And I think that's why most of us are in a spiritual community in the first place. We want to know God. We want to know what this is, this great mystery that we're trying to understand and build this relationship with, or understand what our relationship with it is. And that idea of communing with Spirit, of coming together through contemplative practices, through connection in community, to have that greater understanding of the divine. If we are truly each a divine spark of God, like we talk about, that we are created of the one substance, the one essence and presence that is the divine, the all that is, then we are seeking to reunite with that flame, our spark, reuniting with that flame through the doorway of the silence. We walk with God through a meditative practice of entering the silence. And entering the silence is a gateway, of course, to improving our access to our intuition. Intuition, of course, is defined in the science of mind of knowing without any process of reasoning. We don't have to sit down and analyze and figure out the best thing to do. We just know. We just know. And we've all had moments of knowing without being able to explain why we know that's the best way to go or the best selection to make or the best thing to do. We can't explain it. And someone else that doesn't have that same intuitive hit at the same time may question us. Well, why do you think we should go down that alley instead of that? I don't know. That one just feels better. What do you mean it feels better? It's an alley. It feels better, right? We have a feeling sense within us about what's true, right, and what's dangerous. We have that feeling sense. Our intuition is much like instinct in the animals. Holmes compares it in The Science of Mind. You've probably heard the comparison. How does a salmon know to swim back upstream to where it was born as a little bitty egg, right? How does it know to go back there to spawn again? How do the monarch butterflies know which forests to land in Monterey or Mexico, wherever they go? How do they know that specific forest is where they go? It's the same thing. It's the idea of instinct, intuition, the same way that we know something, again, is true, good, or dangerous. True, good, or dangerous. So the questions that we're going to be exploring this month as we look at intuition is how do we access it and how do we trust it? How do we trust this connection with Spirit? How do we build that trust? How do we realize this divine relationship that we have with our source, with that divine flame that we are a spark of? How do we realize that connection with the utilization of our intuition? We have access to all that is, but we have to listen. We have to listen to hear, to feel, to sense that access. And listening requires us to surrender a little bit, doesn't it? Listening requires us to surrender just a little bit. Imagine you're listening to a friend tell a story. Imagine yourself in conversation. And as they're telling their story, you're really only half listening because you're planning what you're going to say. You're planning how you're going to respond. You're planning what advice you're going to give them, right? So we're only kind of halfway listening. If you've ever been in those science of mind classes where we have you A and B. Who's A, who's B? One of us is going to receive, one of us is going to speak, right? And the receiver just has to listen, don't they? You can't say anything. You have to listen attentively. The first time you did that exercise, you may have struggled with it a bit because I've got something to say. That's very important. This happened to me. I can tell you how I resolved it. I have advice for you. Right? All this is coming up, but we can't say that. We are only listening. We are only listening. Imagine you surrender to the conversation with your friend, giving her the gift of sacred listening and being fully present, truly hearing her words, her emotions, without thinking about how you're going to respond, what advice you're going to give her. What's she really mean? Judging what she says. Imagine if you surrendered all of that to simply sacred listening to the other person. This is listening with our hearts. Most of us have a meditation practice. How easy is it to turn off those thoughts? How easy is it to get into the gap where there is no thought? How easy is that for us? We've got the same thing happening there as well, don't we? If we can relax into that time and into that silence and into that space, we can begin to feel. We begin to feel what is occurring within us as we connect into the silence and listening with our hearts. Meditation, communion, silence are all practices of listening to the quiet voice within us, the voice of spirit. We say the quiet voice of spirit, the small, still voice of spirit you may have heard. And as I was thinking about that this week, and what does that really mean? Are we saying spirit's small? You know, spirit doesn't have an opinion about our lives, you know, things like that. And what came to me was it's not an intrusive voice. It can be loud, but it's not intrusive. Our intellect, that can be intrusive. Yes? Oh, yeah. I know this is true. I know this is right. I've learned. I've educated. I know. So our intellect can be intrusive. Our ego can be intrusive. Ever said something you regretted? Yeah. Really? Those voices, we are familiar with those voices. Those voices can be intrusive. The voice of spirit is not intrusive. That's why we go into the stillness with this listening expectancy to hear that quiet voice, that non-intrusive voice. My favorite of those Ernest Holmes quotes that I read you, did you like those? Did you find one you liked and all of that? There was a lot of them, wasn't it? But they were all very good, very, very good. But the one that was my favorite out of it was the last one. He says, God speaks when we listen. What was that, E.F. Hutton? Merrill Lynch? I don't know. Anyway, God is there when we open the door. When we listen, there is a response from something greater than ourselves, that is the infinite person, the limitless possibility. God speaks whenever and wherever we listen to our inner voice. Now, you have heard me say that spirit is always giving, right? And that we have the mental equivalent. We have the mold of the thing that we're trying to create in our life, and that the infinite substance fills that mold. Well, that's one That's the idea of creation and manifesting. But the idea that Spirit is always giving also means this idea that Spirit's always speaking to us. It's always giving of itself, not only in form, but in thoughts and ideas. And it's always pressing against us, available as wisdom and intelligence, answers, creativity. One of the things that keeps coming up in our book study is you can ask God for the little stuff too, right? You can ask for the little stuff. You know, I'm feeling overwhelmed in this situation about what to do with this closet or whatever. You can ask. It's okay, right? We can ask even in those simple things of daily life. It's okay because Spirit is always there. Always, always there. When we surrender the external distractions and we reach in and we open with an open and listening heart. Now, being in the silence and the stillness doesn't mean that we have to just simply sit still, right, and be in a quiet space, although that's always a good start. It's a good place to start. Eventually, though, you can be surrounded by nature or even mindfully doing the dishes or some other task and be present and be connected and be listening to Spirit. There's no place we have to go for the silence. There is no particular formula or posture that we need to have or to follow. The silence is the place within us where we know God. That's where the silence resides in us. Now, if you can go there instantly right now, bravo. Bravo. I love it. Many people can because they have developed a sense of constant, conscious connection with God. And they are always connected and listening. Thich Nhat Hanh comes to mind, the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa. Now, Mother Teresa, in the midst of Calcutta and the orphanage and the things that she did, the woman had a God presence about her, didn't she? She was connected. She was always listening. She knew God was right where she was, no matter the chaos and whatever was happening around her. So she's one of the ones who was able to be there now always. Didn't have to go sit on a meditation cushion to find God in Mother Teresa. She was always right there. But if you're not there yet, maybe starting in that stillness, in that silent place, with a daily meditation practice is the route for you. Maybe that's a way to start. The key is to remember that God is always right where we are. And that can be easy to forget, can't it? When life gets hectic. Okay, I'll tell that story. We were coming back through, where do we just go? Virgin Islands. And we were coming out of the airport, and you get to the airport, and everybody had been so friendly and so warm and so welcoming, all the way traveling from the U.S. all the way through the Virgin Islands, and we got back to the Virgin Islands airport, St. Thomas Airport. It was a little different there. The people on the counter at Delta were not friendly, like they had been throughout all of the Delta system. It's like, okay, thank you, we'll go, not helpful. And then they take us over and we go through, and then we have to go through customs. We have to go U.S. customs to get out of the Virgin Islands. And that was going along okay, and then we go out of customs and we have to go all the way around to now go through TSA, right? So we've been at the ticket counter, we've been through customs, now we're going through TSA. Well, at every place they say, okay, you can put your ID away, but then you get to the next one, they say, we want your ID again. If you've traveled, you know you've got 19,000 bags, right? Plus, you've still got your big checked bag because they won't let you get rid of that until you get ready to go through TSA after you've gone through customs. So you're toting all that. It got a little stressful. And by the time we got to the TSA guys that were actually taking the bags through the big tunnel thing, I was a little stressed. I kind of forgot my center. So that's how it happens when we allow that stuff around us, other people, to take away our center. And I did. I found it again pretty quickly, but I did allow it to happen at least for a few minutes between customs and getting through TSA. So, God God is always right where we are. We don't need to reach out to find God, but to reach in. To reach in. And the way that I reached in was to, when I finally got to the other side and just had my carry-on, my shoes in my hand, I sat down to put my shoes on, and I closed my eyes. And I went within. And I took a few breaths. My husband ran off and went to the bathroom because he knew what I was doing. He's like, you take your time, honey. So I got it back together, and off we went and had the rest of a lovely trip home. But God is right where we are, and we just need to reach in. Reach in to find our center, to find our silence, to find our peace, to hear that quiet, small voice of the divine within. Close the doors on discord and confusion, and turn off that external and internal noise. Because most of the noise that was happening in my head at the TSA was all up here. It wasn't necessarily what was happening around me. It was my interpretation of it, right? So it was all this chatter that was getting me. According to our Book of the Month author, Lisa Rankin, from last month, Mind Over Medicine, if you remember that, and she says, I found another quote from her, the subconscious mind is the wellspring of intuition. The subconscious mind is the wellspring of intuition. Now, if you remember, she also told us a very powerful idea last month that our subconscious controls our lives 95% of the time. So let's marry those up. If our subconscious is the wellspring of intuition and our subconscious controls our lives 95% of the time, is intuition really running our lives and we're just not consciously aware of it? We will ponder that more in the coming weeks. Today, however, let's look at our practicing the principles as we see how we can enter the silence to better access our intuition. Now, we have our Mindful Monday newsletter that goes out every Monday morning. Went out on Friday this week, but that was because I was traveling, but it came out on Friday this week. And it is a recap of the message. It's the quotes and some notes from the talk. And it's a way that you can use this to carry this teaching in your life throughout the week. You can sign up in the lobby if you're here today. For those online, if you'd like to sign up, just send me an email and I'll add you to the list. I want to say thank you to everyone that's participating in that. We've got somewhere between 35 and 40 people right now that are on that list and using this practice every week in their life to further their understanding of the science of mind. And that really is our mission here, is to make sure that we continue this teaching out in the world. So number one is entering the silence. Entering the silence. This week, I invite you to consciously practice entering this into times dedicated to being in the silence. As our reading said earlier, turn off your meditation music, turn off the bells and the candles and anything that you use that could be a distraction in any way, and move into simply the silence. And intend to hear God speak. Set your intention as you move into that time to hear Spirit speak. Our intuition is always sending us information, warnings, or encouragement. But often we're too busy or distracted with our own stuff or something external to us to hear it. So turn off the noise and the distractions. Imagine, as you sit down, that you are sitting down with God and that this infinite presence has something very important to tell you. And you're face to face with the divine. Imagine how present you would be to that conversation. Imagine how you would feel in that conversation. Listen with your heart. Listen expectantly with your whole being. Use this powerful imagination to take yourself into that state of expectancy of hearing Spirit speak. Number 2, begin strengthening your intuition. We're working with our intuition all month long. We've got 5 Sundays this month to play with. So we're going to be talking about intuition all month long. And so begin strengthening that and exploring your own intuition as we open this month up. Be attentive to opportunities this week to trust your intuition. Remember that saying that we practice around here, what we focus on expands, right? What we focus on expands. So as we begin to set our intention and focus on opportunities where I can use my intuition and noticing where I am using my intuition, we'll begin to see more of that throughout the week. That will begin to expand our consciousness around our intuition. So look for opportunities to trust, listen better, and remember that your intuition can't talk if you're not listening, right? Trust your gut feeling. Research suggests that emotion and intuition have a physical presence actually in the gut, the second brain. We've talked about that before. Pay attention to when things feel good or bad in the area of the gut or the stomach, and maybe you get goosebumps instead. Maybe you get a shiver down your spine. Maybe your heart races. Maybe your breath escalates. Notice how intuition speaks to you in your physical body, because intuition usually speaks through some sort of emotional reaction in us. You know, they did a study that I was reading about something about cards and how there was one deck that was rigged to win a lot in the beginning and then lose a lot in the end, and the other deck was to just win consistently but not real big and not really any losing. And they handed these people the cards, and as they started going through them, they had monitors on them. And after about 80 cards, something like 80%, 60% of the people could pick the deck that they didn't lose in. But what they noticed was that after 10 cards, almost everyone began to have sweaty palms with the cards that were losers. So they physically knew before they intellectually could process that this was the deck. I thought that was a fascinating study. So pay attention to your body. Pay attention to your body. And for fun, we like fun, yes? Go on the internet and search, how can I trust my intuition? How can I trust it? How can I test my intuition? And play some of the games. Now, be careful, because some of these are phishing scams, okay? I will tell you that. You've got to pay attention to which ones you're logging into. Be careful. But they're kind of fun. I did one, and it was basically choosing between 3 things. There was a series, I think, 10 items. And I scored about 50% and, got the bells and whistles that you're very intuitive and all this. But it was interesting to pay attention to how my body felt as I was making the selections. I wasn't analyzing what was happening. I was just paying attention. And I could feel and sense which one was correct. And there was absolutely no rhyme or reason. Every answer was A, B, or C. But it was a fascinating experience. So go have some fun out there and test your intuition. So living from the intuitive side is about understanding that we all have intuition and we can have access to more of it. Now this week we have opened the doors to this. We've begun with entering the silence as the first step in the place of being. A listening and beginning to recognize how God makes itself known through us, as us. Because that's what intuition is, isn't it? Spirit making itself known through us, the greater intelligence. So be still and know the great I am. Be still and know the great I am. It was Emerson who said, "Let us be silent, that we may hear the whispers of the gods." So it is. Would you join me as we anchor this in prayer this morning? So as we move into a place of stillness, into the place of inner knowing, into the place of recognizing the divine, We recognize in this moment that God is all that there is. The power, the presence, the life, the intelligence, the intellect, the wisdom, the harmony and joy, peace, prosperity. And most of all, God is love. Unconditioned, pressed down to overflowing love. And out of that love, it has created all that is. And included in that is me and each and every one of us gathered here online and those who will be listening in the future. Knowing that we are all in this unity and wholeness of the divine, that we are all in this oneness that is God. We are that love. We are created and sourced of it, and we are it. We are here to express it, to be it. We are here to be prosperous. We're here to be joyful. We're here to be intellectually stimulated, and we're here to learn and grow. We're here to be. We're here to create. And so recognizing this unity that we are, I speak my word now for each and every one of us gathered, knowing, claiming, and accepting the absolute truth of our being. As we open to receive and recognize this intuitive voice of spirit, this quiet, non-intrusive voice of the divine that speaks softly, slowly, clearly through us, without words, without voice, through the feelings in these beautiful bodies that we exist in, that our consciousness rides in. Spirit speaks. We are guided, guarded, and protected always. Questions are answered. Healing is revealed. Prosperity flows. We know God. God knows us. And is ever and always present in, through, and as each of us in each and every moment. There is no place that it is not. And I know for anyone that has anything in their heart today they're seeking prayer for, as we lift that call into this prayer, into this high consciousness of awareness right here now. I know that whatever needs to be revealed is revealed with ease and grace and clarity. I know that prosperity and abundance flow through each and every life and the life of this center, that we are all abundantly sourced, and that we graciously give and circulate that good. I know that health is revealed as each and every one of us, that we are blessed with the divine health of God, the DNA of God, and that our bodies know exactly how to balance and sustain us. And I know that creative expression joyfully bubbles up in each and every one of us in our endeavors, whether it's in a work environment or creative expression or whatever that may be in our daily lives, as we express our gifts to the world. And how grateful I am for this knowing, how grateful I am for this truth, how grateful I am for this awareness of the spiritual beings that we are. And so I just, with that joy and gratitude, release this into the action of law, the activity of mind, knowing that it's already done. For it's done in the mind of God. I could not speak these words if it were not. It is already done. We just simply allow its unfoldment through our lives, here and now, as we affirm together. And so it is.